Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel M Stuart Paintings. On today's acrylic painting tutorial we're going to paint this gorgeous city landscape of London. So I'm going to teach you how to paint a sunset over a lovely city scene. So we're going to learn how to blend colours and how to mix colours, how to paint clouds over the top and create a light effect using colours and tones, how to put some detail and push things far back using colours and bring things forward, and you can create this gorgeous city sunset landscape in acrylic paint. So let's get into it. So it's a really easy tutorial today. You're going to need the following colours. They are titanium white, Naples yellow, cad yellow, matte orange, rose pink, crimson, cobalt blue, iris purple, violet purple, some raw umber and matte black. Now don't worry if you don't have those colours. I'm going to show you how to mix them if you don't have them all, because some of them are hard to get. But we're going to teach you how to do a city landscape. So all I've got here is I've got the sun. If you want to pause the video and copy the outline, and I've just used some cobalt blue just to put a far away city scene. We've got things like the O2 or the Millennium Dome here on the side, and we've got some buildings in the foreground. So if anyone wants to, just before we start, pause the video, please help yourself and just copy down the outline. Now Naples yellow you can just make using cad yellow, lots and lots of white to make it buttery, and you add a dot of black. And all we're going to do is just add a little bit of purple to it. So cad yellow, lots and lots and lots of white, a dot of black and a dot of purple. And you should get this creamy buttery colour. So there we go. And all we're going to do, we're going to block in our painting with just nice sort of pastel colours, and we're going to create a nice sunset. So don't worry if you paint over your blue city outline. We're going to use tape later. I'm going to show you how to use tape to keep everything straight. So all we're doing, we're mixing white, cad yellow, a dot of purple and a dot of black. And you should get this lovely colour. And as I say, the good thing about painting in cobalt blue for your outline is it's with these pastel colours, it will still show underneath. So what's really good about using a dark colour on your canvas, you can still see it underneath. So don't worry if you go over it, we can neaten it all up later. Now this colour here, this colour is called iris purple, and again I appreciate not everyone has access to this colour. All it is a bit of purple, the dark purple that I've got in the colour in the corner, and some cobalt blue mixed together. So if you mix bright purple, which is in the top right hand corner, and a little bit of cobalt blue, you should get that colour. Okay, and all I'm going to do is mix some white into it, so it's just like a cool bluey purple. Okay, and all we're going to do is just create a lavender tone, and in the middle we're just going to come down and bring that into the yellow that we just made, that creamy yellow. So all I'm doing, I've got a big brush and I'm just creating X shapes, and I'm just gently easing up on the pressure as I move down and just blurring the two colours together. So really, really easy. So we've got purple and white and a little bit of blue just to make it more pastel. And we're just going down into that yellow. There we go. So it's getting darker as we move up into the canvas. And all we're going to use violet purple, which is just normal dark purple. We're going to add a little bit of blue to it just to make it a bit darker. So we want a really dark, harsh colour, and we're going to add a tiny bit of brown to it. Now brown is really good for making things look earthy and realistic, but it's a bit too harsh, so we're just going to add a little bit of white. So purple, little bit of blue, a dot of brown and some white, and a dot of black, just a pinprick, and it will suck out a little bit of the colour. Let's make it a little bit bluer, let's make it a little bit darker. And all we're going to do, look, we've got this dark purple now. And all we're going to do, look, we're just going to make the edges, the top of our painting nice and framed. So we've got nice harsh corners. And we're just going to go back. I'm just going to clean my brush. I'm just going to dip it in some water. I'm just going to go back to the previous colour. And watch, I'm just going to create X shapes and just blur the two colours together. And what you should have is a nice transition from the real hot yellow at the bottom of the horizon to the cool blue into the darker purple. Now if you're like me and you're a bit of a perfectionist and you have streaks and marks, because acrylics are very watery, I'm just going to fast forward it, but all I'm doing, I've dried my work with a hairdryer, and all I'm doing is just while the canvas is dry, I'm just reapplying the exact same colours. So I'm using that creamy yellow, I'm going into the white and purple and blue, and I'm just reapplying it just to try get some of the brush marks and the horrible streaks out of my canvas. That's the reason I always paint my canvas burnt sienna. I know everyone asks. It's because it allows me to show, especially when using pastel colours, where I've missed bits on my canvas. Because if my canvas was white, I might not notice the marks. So look, we're just mixing the dark colour, which was purple, a little bit of cobalt blue, some white, a dot of brown and a dot of black. We're just edging the corners. And all we're doing, we're just going back to the previous lighter lavender tone and just mixing it into the corners. Just easing up on the pressure, and we should have created a lovely background sky before we put all our clouds on. So again, if you just dry your work, it's much easier to put brighter colours and highlights over the top. So all I'm doing now, I'm just getting some titanium white. Right in the centre, I'm just going to put a focal point, and that's going to be the sun. And I'm going to get some bright cad yellow, only cad yellow, nothing else. And I'm just going to create a circle around the sun. So this is sort of the glow from the heat of the sun. And we're going to start building up clouds. So it's a really easy technique. If you just think of the sun as a gigantic ball of light. So what we want to do is create sort of a flame effect. So we're going to use, if you think of a colour wheel, we're going to use really hot colours around it. So yellows and oranges. So think of things like a lemon or a bright orange. They're really, really vibrant. So we're going to add a tiny bit of this bright pink to it. So a little bit of yellow, some orange. And we're just going to add a little bit of purple just to make it less vibrant. So if you look here, I've got all these bright colours on the left, and I've got all these darker colours on the right. So I've got all the cool colours on one side and all the bright colours on the other side. So think of a rainbow. You've got all these sort of hot tones like yellows, oranges and pinks going into cooler tones like purples and blues. So what we're doing is around the sun, we're going to use these hot colours. So we've created this nice orangey pink. And all we're going to do is at the horizon, we're just going to create sort of flat clouds that are sort of fading off into the distance. So we're going to have some quite low level just on the horizon. And then we're going to get some purple. We're just going to make a little bit of brown, just a tiny dot of brown, a little bit of yellow to the mix. So what we're doing by using purple and brown, we're just darkening up the colour. So we're just making the tone a little bit darker, a little bit more earthy. And just at the base of the horizon, we're just going to put a shadow colour on first. And then we'll put some highlights over the top. So if you imagine these are sort of the wispy clouds that sit right on the horizon. So when you're looking out into the distance, you'll see things like fade off into the distance. That was my hand trying to explain that. So there we go. We're just going to go right down to the edge of the horizon. We're just going to create some wispy shapes. I'm just using a really thin brush, just a small brush, because it's easier to do thin lines. And as I say, don't worry if it's a bit wonky. We can straighten it all up with tape later. And we're just going to add a little bit more purple to the mix. So as we move up and as we move to the left and the right of the sun, our clouds and our colours are going to get slightly darker because they're getting less sunlight. They get more in the shade. So we're just gradually, by adding a little bit more of the cooler colours like purple, we're just making them look darker either side. So we're going to get some orange and we're going to get some yellow. So we're going to add lots of yellow because orange is really overpowering. So we're just going to add a lot more yellow to the mix. So we're just going to create sort of a peachy tone. So a little bit of orange and predominantly yellow. Going to add a little bit of pink just to make it more peachy. So think of the colour of a peach. We're going to add a tiny bit of brown just to make it earthy and a tiny bit of purple. That just sucks out a little bit of the vibrancy. There we go. A bit more pink, why not? So we've got this really nice vibrant colour. So if you think just around the sun, we want to make the transitions just like in our background sky. We want to make them less harsh. So we're going to go from yellow to this more peachy orange around the sun before it goes into the darker reddy orange, and it just looks like heat. It just looks like glow from the sun. So what I'm doing, I'm just trying to emphasize the orange just on the tops because this is part of the clouds we'll be getting the sunlight. So if you just think of like a flame or a candle, all around it has that glow. So what we're doing, we're just trying to match that. We're just using colours to give the effect of sunlight or heat. So just by adding a warmer colour around the sun, it will just look less harsh. So there we go. So we're creating this glow effect. We can even get a bit of yellow, look, and we just slightly blend it into it while it's wet, just so the transitions look seamless, so they're not so harsh. You haven't got a big jump from yellow into the orange. So look, just creating a glow effect using colour. Perfect for beginners, super easy. And look, you get this glow from the sun, look at that. Easy peasy. So we're just going to get some more of that orange colour we used, which was orange, yellow, pink and a tiny bit of purple. So as we move away from the sun, the clouds are going to get a little bit darker and they're going to get a bit more silhouetted, but they're still getting the heat from the sun, so there's still this nice sort of pinky colour. And all I'm doing, I'm just going to start creating the shapes of clouds. Now what I like to do flat clouds that go across the page, or the canvas, excuse me, vertically. So they go quite flat. And as I move up in the sky, I just make them slightly more diagonal. So all I'm doing, I'm just starting to make them a little bit more going off at an angle. So they're not just going straight across the canvas. They're just slightly going up diagonally towards a corner. So what I do is I load up my brush, look, I just push down to create big splodges, and I just ease up to create little splodges. So I push down really hard to get the big splodges, and I just scrape back and forth to create the little ones with hardly any pressure, and you just sort of get some wispy amount of paint. So I'm just creating random shapes of clouds. So look, hardly any pressure and you just get the wispy ones, but if you push down hard like now, you get big blobs. So you can have some that are thick, some that are thin. So look, if you think we're matching the sunlight, so where is yellow at the bottom? We've got these really warm colours, and now we're moving into a cooler area of the sky. We're going to use darker colours, so we're going to match that in the clouds. So these are all the hot colours, and that's what we've used to create the heat. So now we're going to use some of the cooler colours to show that these clouds are more in the shade. So we're going to use crimson. So crimson's kind of an in-between. It's not too hot and it's not too cold. So crimson's like a warm purple. So you can use red and purple to get crimson if you haven't got it at home. So use red and purple. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a little bit of brown and a dot of black just to suck a bit of the vibrancy out of it. So I've just got this lovely reddy purple, but it's a bit too harsh. I'm just going to add a little bit of orange, just so there's not so much of a jump between that hot colour that we just used previously. And all I'm going to do, because I want people to focus on the sun in the middle, I'm just at the sides going to use this darker colour, just like we do with the corners in all our paintings. I'm just going to make the clouds either side of the sun a little bit darker, so you look straight down the middle of my painting, you see. Little pro tip. Bob Ross taught me this when I was a kid, because if you have darker corners and you have something central to look at, it just makes your eyes naturally focus towards the middle of your painting. So by just having little darker sides, look, we just make these areas a little bit darker. They're just getting a bit less sunlight because they're further away to the sides. So by using that colour, all we're doing, look, we're just framing the painting, just like we did with the corners, so you look towards the middle. So now we're going to create just a little bit harsher clouds. So if you imagine these clouds are getting less sunlight, so they're more dark in colour. But it's the same technique, look, we're just sort of going diagonal and pushing down to create the big blobs, and I'm easing up just to create the wispy sort of shapes. So push down hard to get really sort of dark colours, and then just ease up on the pressure. So look, we're just going out diagonally, look, push down, just creating funny shapes. So if you think this is me trying to explain it, if you think the world is a dome, that's why I go out diagonally, because if you think the clouds are sort of going round in a circle. So if you think of a ball, the clouds would go round sort of at an angle. So that's why I always come out diagonally. And again, if they're going towards the corners, it just looks more realistic and it just frames your corners. So I have these I can't talk at the moment. These flat horizontal clouds at the base of the horizon, and then more diagonal as you move up. So we're going to add a darker third tone now. So we're going to add the really dark purple. And we're going to add a little bit of blue to make it even cooler, and some brown just to make it more earthy. We're going to add a little bit of the crimson, just again so there's not so much of a jump, just having a little bit of that in-between colour, and a dot of black. So we're making a nice dark harsh colour now. So we've got these three tones, the warm colour, the middle colour, and the darker colour, like the three bears. One that's not too hot, one that's in between, and one that's ice cold. So this dark purple, if you imagine this is the area of the clouds, this is getting hardly any sunlight, so it's really cold. It's really almost like a silhouette. So look, you can just go over the top on the edges of these clouds, just again so the person focused towards the middle, by just making them more harsh. So can you see now our background sky from that really creamy yellow into the lavender, into the dark corners? Now we're adding these clouds that also have a similar from hots to colds. Can you see how it's tricking your eye and it creates the realism? So there's no detail, it's all in the colours. It's all about knowing how to do this. Little tips and tricks for artists, you see. You can apply this to anything. So look, all we're just doing the same technique. We're just doing splats to create these lovely wispy clouds. We're going to have some breaking off. And now it's starting to look really realistic, but there's no detail. So look, we have some sort of breaking away here, little blobs. Look how fantastic that looks, see? So that area just here is a bit boring, so I'm just going to go back to my middle colour because it's about in the middle of the painting. So look, you can always add more detail, you can always make it a little bit more photorealistic if you want to, by just sort of matching the area in the background with the colours for the clouds. So if you think in the middle area it's still quite warm, so we're going to use this sort of crimson colour, and if you were adding at the top you could use the darker colour, and if you're adding at the bottom you can use the warmer colour. So that is looking fantastic. So our sunset looks brilliant over London. So we've got this lovely transition in colour and we've got these lovely clouds. So we're going to start just adding some city aspects to the painting and also the water. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to dry our painting with a hairdryer before we apply any tape. If you measure a straight line, just using a tape measure, I always use chalk just so I can just have an outline before I put my tape on. And we're going to get some crimson and brown. So crimson and brown and a little bit of blue just to make it more silhouetted. So plenty of brown. So what we're trying to do, we're going to try to create the illusion of far off skyscrapers and a city. We're not going to have any detail because I want this tutorial for beginners, but all we're going to do is just create the illusion of faraway buildings. So all I'm doing, I'm just creating little sort of squares and rectangles coming up on the horizon, and I'm going straight down to the tape so it will be totally straight. So we'll have this nice straight horizon, so you don't have to worry about it being wonky or crooked. If you've measured it with a tape measure, it should be lovely and straight. So what I'm doing now, I'm just creating little rectangles coming up just to give the impression of faraway skyscrapers. Now you don't have to paint London. You could paint wherever you're from, or a famous city where you live or you want to go. So you can even put shapes of buildings that are famous where you're from. I'm just doing little rectangles because this could be sort of Greenwich, and this can be all looking over to Canary Wharf. So the reason we're using a brown colour for our silhouette is because it's still quite near to the sun, even though it's far off in the distance. So if you've been watching the previous tutorials where we use cool colours if we had a blue sky, well, we're going to use a hot colour for a silhouette because it's still close to that sun, so it's still getting lots of heat from the sun. And if you remember, we don't use really dark tones for far away things because it brings it forward. So by having a bit of crimson and a bit of purple, we've still got a silhouette, but we're pushing it back far off into the distance. So go right up to the tape just to create a nice straight horizon, and then just create some little squares and rectangles for little buildings. Just try to have them all different heights so they don't all look the same. It's easier if you use a thin little brush. And the great thing about the tape is if you struggle with painting straight lines, you can just use the tape right on its edge to get a nice straight horizon. There we go, easy peasy. So when you're happy with your little buildings, please remove the tape and please dry your painting again with a hairdryer, because we're going to put some tape over it. So please, I insist you dry it, because you don't want to put this tape over and just rip off all those buildings that you just painted. So we're just going to put right back on the line a nice straight piece of tape, and we're going to just neaten up our water. So this could be the Thames. So we're going to mix the same colour. Mine's dried because the acrylics dry really quick. You can use a misting bottle that you would spray plants with to keep your palette wet. I forgot to keep my palette wet and my colour was dry. So I've mixed some pink, orange, yellow, a little bit of brown and a dot of purple into the mix. I'm just creating a warm sort of pinky colour. So very similar to the clouds we did around the sun. And all we're going to do, look, we're just going to block in with a big brush. Again, don't worry, that tape will create a nice straight edge. So don't worry if you go over your outline in the cobalt blue. We'll neaten all that up in a minute. And again, if you get any streaks, you can always dry your work with a hairdryer when you're blocking in at this stage, and then just reapply the same colour just to get out any bits of your canvas that you've missed or get any streaks. So we're going to create some heat around the sunlight, and we're going to darken up the corners. So what we're going to do, we're going to mix some purple. So we've got this cool purple, which is just purple and blue. So purple and blue, got a little bit of the crimson, so we add a little bit of heat to it, and a little bit of brown just to make it nice and earthy, a dot of black. So we're just making a really similar cool colour. So it's still got plenty of blue in it, because blue's lovely and cool. So this purple and blue is really nice and cool. We're just going to load up our brush. Now I was going to create waves and create detail, but if you're standing this far back, you wouldn't really see any waves. I was going to use a flat brush and teach you like I normally do with the other tutorials, but I think it would look a bit daft. So what I did was I just swapped, after looking at it now, I thought, looks a bit weird. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap over to me blocking in big brush, because it just doesn't look right. So I've just swapped around to a big brush, and all I'm doing, look, I'm just going to darken up the corners, and because the canvas is dry, I'm just going to ease up on the pressure. I'm just going to blend it into that previous colour. So look, I'm just creating X shapes. I'm just glazing over the top, so I'm just making this corner nice and dark. So again, if you think with the light, just like we did with the top of the painting, we're just doing that in the bottom corners. So you focus towards the middle, and it looks like the sun's gleaming on the river. So look, all I'm doing, look, I'm just glazing over the top, almost like colouring it in. Just making my corners, and I'm just easing up on pressure as I move towards the middle. And that gives a nice little glow in the middle, you see. And I'll go right up to the tape. So again, we have a nice straight horizon. So that was an easy trick, so it worked out alright. And I'm going to get some of the yellow and orange that we mixed. So yellow, cad yellow and orange, just mixed together. I'm just going to wipe away most of the paint, and I'm just going to glaze this area. So just like we did with the corners, just under the sun, and going right up to the top of the tape. I'm just going to create a little bit of heat coming from around that sun, just to create a glow from the sun on the Thames. So again, look, it's just a really easy trick. And we'll remove our tape. Dun, dun, dun. We should have a lovely straight horizon. Now, if you're like me and you've missed a little bit of area, you can always just go over it. You can just get your big brush, look, and you can just go over it, and you can neaten up your faraway skyscrapers. It's the great thing about acrylic paints, they're so quick to dry. So if you ever make a mistake, just dry it with a hairdryer, just dry your canvas, and just reapply the paint just to make it look neater. So look, if I go over some of these buildings, I can always just dry it and just re-put them in. There's nothing you can't fix. It's awesome. Look at that glow, that looks fantastic. I'm just going to get some of the darker colour again, and I'm just, while it's dry, I'm just going to emphasise these corners. Just going to make them a little bit darker. One of the reasons I always make my left hand corner dark, you'll see in a minute when we do the skyscrapers, is is where I'm going to sign it. So you need a dark colour in order for your signature to show. So I'm going to dry my work, and I'm just going to create the Millennium Dome, or the O2 which it's called now. So if anyone's familiar to London, we have a big stadium called the O2. It used to be called the Millennium Dome because it was made for the Millennium in 2000. So I'm just going to mix some blue and black and some crimson. And it was made to celebrate the Millennium, you see. And it was this weird dome, and they've converted it into making concerts. So what I'm doing, look, I'm using a darker, cooler colour, and I'm just creating the same sort of little skyscrapers around it because it has some buildings around it. And by using a darker colour, so more blue, purple, black and a little bit brown, what it does is it brings it closer towards the viewer. So we've got the warm colour underneath the sun in the silhouettes, and now we've got these darker, harsher blues, but we're not quite using black yet. We don't want to bring it too forward. So we're doing the same little technique. We've just got this little dome. As I say, if you lived in Australia, you could do the Sydney Opera House. If you lived in America, you could do the Statue of Liberty even. So you can do anything. You don't have to do the Millennium Dome. Excuse me, the O2 now. Shows my age. So I'm just going to mix some pink, white and a little bit of purpley blue. So pink, white and purpley blue. And I'm just going to block in the dome. It's normally bright white in the day, but obviously we've got the sky. So whatever the colour of the sky would be, you would make this a very similar colour. So we're just going to block it in first. And then if the sun is coming on one edge of it, if we add a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow and a little bit of pink, we could emphasize some heat. So if you think of a nice rounded edge, one side will have a little shimmer to it, won't it? So all we're going to do, by just using colour, we can just add that, and while it's still wet we can just blend it together, and it looks like it's got a little shimmer to it. So if I zoom in for you, make it a little bit easier to see, and it has these weird things that stick out. It kind of looks like the guy from Hellraiser's head, Pinhead or whatever he's called. It has these weird sort of metal bits that come out the dome. So as I say, wherever you're from, you could create a little landmark that's familiar to be where your city is. So just creating the illusion of some buildings. And then when you're happy with it, when you remove your tape, as I say, don't worry about any chalk marks. I always use chalk when I'm measuring because you can just wipe it away, you see? You don't have any horrible pencil marks, so chalk is fantastic for using on canvas because you can even put things with chalk to create where you want things to be before you actually paint them. It's really, really handy. And I don't know how old people are, but back in the millennium, or just before the millennium, the press made up a rumour that there'd be a thing called a millennium bug, and planes would fall from the sky and all computers wouldn't work, and none of that happened, which is a bit like the press today, where they exaggerate and say things that could happen but never do. But anyway, that's another story. We're going to get some black and some brown and some blue. So we're going to mix a really, really dark colour, so black, brown and blue. And we're going to do the nearer skyscrapers. So I'm going to create a big block in the left hand corner. So I'm going to have a big flat or a big apartment building, say. Just so that's where I'm going to sign it. So I want to make a really big sort of skyscraper here in the left hand corner because I want to sign my work. And all I'm doing, I'm just creating the illusion of tops of buildings. So I'm just creating the illusion of squares and buildings. As I say, you can go detailed if you want to put things in like, I don't know, radio towers and little satellite dishes and stuff you can do. But I just want to create little rectangles and squares just to create the tops of these buildings. Now acrylics, because they are very watery, with these buildings, now putting the paint on, they're a bit flat. So what you can do is, rather than mix that colour, you can just use jet black. You can just use black if you want to create a more silhouetted, because I'm noticing now when we're putting this on, it's just not, it's a bit flat, isn't it? That's the problem with acrylics, because they're water based, they pick up the colour from underneath. So sometimes if you want to make something darker or brighter, you might have to give it 2 coats of paint. So you might just have to dry it and then just reapply the paint. So what I would recommend, if you just use plain old black, and if it's not dark enough like mine, just give it a 2nd coat of paint when it's dry, and it will look much more silhouetted and more harsh. So again, we're just going to do all different shapes and sizes so they don't all look the same. There we go, all blocked in. And then look, if you just get black and you just go over the top of them just to make them look more silhouetted, it just looks a bit nicer. So don't worry about mixing that colour, just use black and then you'll create this lovely silhouette. So I've just noticed our dome, our lovely Millennium Dome, sorry, O2, is here in the middle. It just looks a bit flat, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make a little bit harsher colour and bring it a bit more towards the viewer. So this is what I was teaching you about, using your darkest darks to bring things real close to the viewer and to make things less harsh. So we're going to add blue to black and crimson, so it's not as harsh in colour. It's still got a lot of blue in it, so it's not just pure black, it's got some blue in it. It'll be nice and silhouetted, but it'll still push it back a little bit into the distance. So I'm just going to go over the top of the colour we just had, just make it a little bit harsher, just bring it a bit closer towards the viewer. So that's what I was saying, with acrylics, if you do have areas of your painting that are just a bit flat and a bit boring, you can just go over the top in the same colour or even a more vibrant, harsher colour, just to emphasise your shadows or your highlights. So you can do the same with your sun. If your sun's not looking that vibrant, you just go over the top with the yellow and the white and just make it look more vibrant. So that's looking better. That's sort of bringing it closer towards the viewer. So we've got that nice dark corner for where I'm going to sign her. And I'm just going to use a fine liner. I'm just going to go around my dome and just make the little sort of metal things that come out of her. So just like I've made the area darker, I can even add highlights and make them look more vibrant. So look, just by using some cad yellow and white, so just cad yellow and white, I'm just making this area of the dome look like the sun is shimmering on one side. And then I'm just going to mix some orange and yellow together. So orange and yellow, a little bit of pink, just to make it more peachy. So just like we did with the clouds, look, I'm just going from a really bright yellow to a more peachy colour into the cooler purple. So again, it's just little transition tricks using colours. So look, using really vibrant colours one side to emphasise the heat, so the shimmer of the sun, so that light's beaming down on one side. And then you go to the in-between colour in the orangey peach, and then the more cooler colour in the purple. So you can just take your time, you can just create sort of a 3D effect. It's all through colours, as I say, no detail. And then this left hand side, look, we'll get our cooler colours. So we're going to use that cool purpley blue, because this area is getting no sunlight. So it's really more in the shade. It's more cooler. Here we go. So that looks fantastic. I'm just going to get some purple and blue. A little bit of white. A little bit of pink. Just to create some of the sky colour. Just at the bottom here, these areas are getting some sunlight from the sky, just to make it look more realistic. There we go. And then we're just going to get our dark bluey colour. We just put some of our buildings in. Some more of its weird spikes. And I might even outline it just to make it look more harsh. In real life I wouldn't outline it, but why not? It'll just make it look more fun. Because an outline kind of makes it look a little bit cartoony. You wouldn't see this in real life. But I think for the tutorial it looks kind of cool. Here we go. She looks really cool. Right, so I'm going to create a shimmer in the Thames, in the water below, so in the river below. So I'm just going to get Cad Yellow. I'm going to load up a flat-headed brush. And flat-headed brushes are really good to do straight lines. So look, all I'm going to do is just create little zigzags that come down and create little lines to create a shimmer in the water, so in the river below. And that looks like the sun sort of shimmering down onto the River Thames. And again, it all matches our light. So we've got our darkened corners, we've got this sunlight in the middle, and it gives you something to focus on. So I'm just going to get some yellow. Now what you can do if you want to, just like how we outlined the dome, you don't have to do this. You could add little windows in your buildings. So just by using little bright colours such as Cad Yellow, or even white if you wanted to. If you just use a fine liner, just a thin brush, you can just create little dots, just little random dots and shapes, and you can create the illusion of lights on at night time. So as the sun is setting, people turn their lights on, you get these little glows of the buildings. Again, just looks kind of cool. So again, just like the building shapes, just try to do them randomly, not all the same, and it will just look more realistic if they're all different heights and shapes and sizes. So, all different areas. I don't want to put too many in the left corner because I want to sign it. So I want it nice and dark. And if you don't like them, look, you can always just paint over them. So you can have just some black. You can see how it looks. It's up to you. It's a personal preference. Some people I think will like it. Some people will think it looks a bit cartoony, so they'll just go over it in black. So whatever you choose at home, it's your painting. You're the boss. It's your creation. So I'm just getting a bit of black and getting rid of some of mine. Just smudging it. Gives it a kind of glow. So look, I've signed her in the bottom left hand corner. So you've learned how to do this transition in your background sky, and then you've learned how to use colours to create the heat effect and also the shadow effects and cooler colours to create the clouds. You've learned how to use warmer colours to push back the city, and then how to bring things closer using darker, harsher, cooler colours. and you've painted this lovely city landscape of London in a sunset. So thank you so much for watching. My name is Murray. We have plenty of landscape painting tutorials here on my channel. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done already, and thank you so much to everyone who has and is supporting the channel. Look after yourself, guys, and take care, and we'll see you soon for the next painting tutorial. See you soon, guys. Take care. Bye.